Yeah, I know. And hello, everyone. This is Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And today's discussion deals with the aftermath of infidelity. And again, we dive into the world of celebrity relationships. We are going to discuss important lessons. Um, and today, one of our important lessons that we will discuss, we will use as an illustration the very tragic affair between TJ Holmes and Amy Robach and the impact their affair had on their respective marriages, and also the impact of their affair and how it really changed their careers. And in our discussions, we're going to hit on three things. Number one, we're going to talk about, is the grass always greener? You leave one relationship to go to another. Is the grass always greener? Is it always better in a new relationship? And you are dealing with issues in your current relationship, and the way to address that is to say goodbye to the person you're with and then move on to a new person. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about trustworthiness, like what happens when people have an affair and how to know if you're dating somebody who's trustworthy, because we want to avoid being on the receiving end of deception and dealing with infidelity. And I think that we'll also talk about also ways to prevent infidelity in your relationship, if that's even possible. But to help us with this discussion, I brought in my dear friend, she's back, and a colleague, Dr. Cris.
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
And I
Great
want
to
to
be
say,
here.
yeah, I want to say hello to everybody who joined us today. Anyone who's, let's see, look at the chat. If anybody who's joined us, if you've heard about this situation with TJ Holmes and Amy Robach, I think that's her name. If y'all know
hmm
about it, please put in the chat and let us know if you are aware. In case you're not aware, let me just give you a recap. Okay, so TJ Holmes, he's a news anchor, and I don't know if you all remember, but TJ Holmes was this real fine man. Girl, he was so fine. He was on BET. He did BET News, and I think BET used to have a news segment, and in their news segment, he was kind of the lead anchor on BET, and I think that's how he got started. But anyway, he became very popular, and he moved over to ABC News. And Amy Robach, she was an anchor for Good Morning America. So both of them were married to two other individuals. And then they were on Good Morning America together, and they had this real hot and heavy affair with each other while they were both in a marriage with other individuals. And I think there was a tabloid magazine that broke the news. I guess cameras were around and people found out, and they talked about that. So Amy, the lady, she was married to some man. Both of them got divorced. Everything came out about their affair. And Amy, she has recently turned up in the news because she apparently has landed a $1 million television contract to work with News Nation, to have her own show. And I thought this was really interesting because initially, when both of them uh, got fired from Good Morning America, they were both kind of marketing themselves together as a unit. That Amy and TJ were looking for a co-host opportunity to continue the co-host, as and betting on this new relationship with each other, and people weren't feeling it. So not only has it been devastating for their prospective families, because there are real people involved, there are children involved. TJ was married twice. He had children with both of his wives, now ex-wives. And Amy, I don't know if she had children, but
Yeah.
her relationship dissolved. And not only that, but they lost their job. So they're kind of in it together. So they decided they were just going to commit themselves to each other, let go of their respective spouses. And but this now leaves TJ still unemployed and hunting for a new gig, all while he's got 2 kids from 2 failed marriages, child support he's got to pay. He's still responsible for taking care of these children. And it really leads me to question, is this really worth it? Like, you're ending a marriage to pursue another relationship. And I really wonder, now that Amy has embarked upon this really lucrative new gig without her new man, um, is this relationship now going to withstand this new dynamic? And to start this conversation, I just want to ask Cris, what do you think about all this? And people think that the grass is always greener somewhere else. What do you have to say about that?
Oh yeah, I think we all have those moments where we're looking on the other side of the fence and we're like, boy, that grass looks greener. Um, it's definitely a complicated situation, and I think the reality is that at this point, in the situation, they probably need to regroup and find out like what is going to happen if one, like in the case you were just talking about, if you have one partner, again, given that they put themselves as out as a team once this came out, I'm wondering, have they had that discussion yet? When one gets the opportunity, like you said, a lucrative deal, and the other one doesn't. And then what's more interesting, even more to me, is like, so if one does take that lucrative position and the other one doesn't, what does that look like for your relationship dynamics? Because things are not equal anymore, like it was, at least seemingly, as at the start of a relationship.
Yeah, it's almost like the two of them were kind of rebels together. They were rebelling, and they were going to be a unit together, even though they lost their jobs. It seemed like they were going to be a unit. And, to me, when I think about as far as I'm concerned, this is pretty bumpy. Like, to me, this would indicate a true test of their relationship. Now that she has this gig, is she going to stick around and be patient with him? And more so than that, it's just like, um, you know, when you're already in a committed relationship with another person, you know what I mean? And there's no such thing as a perfect relationship. I mean, at the
No.
beginning of a relationship, it's exciting. The passion is really high. And it's fun and exciting. But then once you get past that first stage of a relationship where things aren't as exciting and the passion isn't quite there, you have to work a little harder to get to keep the passion going. I think for many people, they miss that falling in love stage. And
Yes.
they're kind of like, oh God, I really want that again. And instead
Yes.
of dealing with that and addressing a lot of that, some people just go and just get into a relationship with another person because they're chasing that passion. And I think
Exactly.
that it kind of speaks to us being realistic about relationships. When the passion dies, it doesn't mean that the relationship is over. It really means that you're just moving on to a new phase in your relationship that's really, that's
Right.
normal. And
Ex-
there, and
Absolutely.
I think that even with a lot of couples that I see in my office, I'm finding that some of them get disgruntled. At the beginning, they really can see all the things that they have in common, and they fall in love, and sometimes they ride that wave and get married without having those serious conversations about how they want their marriage to look, not just the falling in love and getting married sort of thing. And I think that some couples don't have realistic expectations. We always think that the grass is greener someplace else just because you have problems. And so the reason why I thought this was really interesting is because this different dynamic between TJ Holmes and Amy Robach, the potential dynamic between the two of them could be changing. And it could be some serious conversations between the two of them. And their relationship needs to be tested. And this is a true test. You got somebody rolling in the dough and another person who's still trying to get their gig going. And, for
Yes.
me, I think another point I wanted to make with that was just that on the same point of having realistic expectations, there are some people who feel like if I'm married to you and we have conflict, then there's something wrong with our marriage. And
Oh,
yeah, and I always have to
yeah,
tell couples like, no, having conflict, is healthy. It's just something to get
absolutely.
through it. It doesn't mean that you get upset with that person and throw them away and then go find somebody else just because there's problems. The grass, as far as I'm concerned, is not greener. Um,
Yeah.
but you got to water the grass in your own lawn. And to do that means you have to figure out how to take accountability for your own role in whatever problems you're having in your current situation. Learn and grow from that instead
Mhm.
of just getting rid of your spouse and moving on and finding somebody else. Because guess what? It's normal that during that passion stage, it's all fun and exciting, but
Oh,
then
yeah.
get into some of the issues. Are you able to work through them? So, anyway, did you want to comment on that, Cris, before I move on?
No, I love what you said, and I feel like the probably the more realistic saying is not is that the grass is greener on the other side. It's more like the grass the grass is greener where you water it, right? Um, and I've used I've used that analogy too. I'm just realizing I've used that analogy where I've said, relationship. You could say there's you, the other person, and then the relationship. And to make that tangible, I say, okay, it's you, it's me, you, and a plant. Now, the plant is the relationship, and you got to water it, just like your lawn. If you want it to be green, you don't pitch the plant and find a new one and say, let's let me get a new plant. I'm going to have a different outcome. No. You have to water the plant. You have to. So it goes back to what you were saying as well. Like we have to look at ourselves. We have to look at ourselves. At minimum, you can say in the most easiest way, like when you leave a relationship and go into another one, I think a common misconception is that okay, it's brand new. Well, the relationship, the plant is brand new. You are not brand new necessarily. You bring those same things to the relationship, and that's not to say that there was things that the other person brought to the table that created problems or conflict that you couldn't um, kind of address effectively. But what do they say? Clean up your side of the street, right? That's what's in our control.
Yeah,
Let's work on ourselves.
what's so interesting is as you were talking, I remember there was a married man that tried to hit on me one time when I was single. And I remember like looking at him like, you need to fix what's going on in your marriage. Like, don't be trying to, I was like,
So
don't be
you.
trying to hit on me. You don't try to hit on me. I don't want no drama. I don't want no piece of it. Fix whatever's going on. And he would complain about his wife and all that. I'm like, you're complaining to the wrong person. You need to talk to your actual wife and try to clean up what's going on in your house. Like,
That's
don't
right.
deal with the issues in your marriage by coming and trying to hit on me. I was like, I don't want no piece of that. And I remember having that conversation with someone, and that was just like, oh, okay, And I guess back then, I just kind of, even though I was really young, I just kind of knew like, no, this isn't right. I mean, not to mention the morality and all of the other issues about
Right.
how you're just torn in those situations. But I didn't want no part of it. I remember having that conversation with someone. But
Yeah, we had learned enough about psychology. We were like,
yes.
we don't even have to go the moral route. We got some questions here for you.
Yeah, and if you pursue me any longer, I'm going to be like, so tell me more about that. What's going on with your marriage? Just, I'll treat you like a client in a minute. But so anyway, I just want to welcome everybody. I didn't get to see people in there. Fatima, oh, look what Fatima says. deceitful relationship almost never lasts because you really can't trust each other because you know what each other did to their spouses. Yeah, it brings up a really weird dynamic. Thank you, Fatima. It's just like,
Yes,
okay, if you lied and cheated on me and we're together, who's to say you're not going to lie? No, if you lied and cheated on your current wife
exactly.
and now we're together, who's to say you're not going to do that to me? Like,
Let me say this. Let me say this because I've been saying this a couple of times recently. What is the best predictor of future behavior for us in the mental health field?
past
Past
behavior.
behavior. Girl.
Yes,
Past behavior.
that is so true. It's just like, no,
So
I'm not having
yeah,
it.
right. Fatima's actually she's so on point because listen, if you it's almost like your foundation of your relationship. If you're walking into that, and it's no judgment, you can just know, be aware at minimum of what you're walking into, no matter what it is, right? You walk into a relationship and you're walking into something that if you're finding this out, even from the very beginning, that's a foundation, right? Just like a house, that's a very shaky foundation. And just like a house, you don't want to build your relationship on shaky foundation.
Yeah, and I think like when you're in a marriage and you're not happy and you deal with it and you button it up and you totally terminate from one situation, you do need a little bit of time to yourself before you start a new relationship. And there is
Absolutely.
no TJ Holmes and Amy, there was no time to themselves before they started a new relationship. They went from a marriage, an actual committed legal marriage to somebody, and now they're off together. So
Right.
that is a very shaky start. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Yes. Anyway, so wait, we got Erica. Welcome, Erica. Welcome, Fly Nubian Queen. Welcome, Goddess. Sekhmet. Oh, yes, that's my goddess. I love her. Welcome, Tina. Welcome, everyone. Um, Erica has an interesting comment. She says the first step is to not avail yourself to adultery. Yes, not open yourself up for it. Adultery is only an option if people allow it to be. If you commit to your marriage and vows, then it's a great first step. Yeah. It's I think it's so interesting because the two of them work together. TJ Holmes and Amy, they really work together. And I think like Good Morning America, you spend more time on set working as a journalist than you do in your respective homes. So most of your time physically is not even with your spouse. So I
Yeah.
mean that also leaves you vulnerable. And even though you spend time away from your spouse, you can still maintain intimacy with each other by calling each other all the time and staying connected to each other in other ways. And I think if
Absolutely.
you start having more conversations with people that you work with, different conversations than you have with your own spouse, people you work with know you better than your own spouse, then I think you need to look at those boundaries. And I think
Yeah.
that's what Erica was talking about. Don't overstep boundaries where it leaves you vulnerable, put you in that position where you just, where you cross the line and there's no turning back after you cross this line. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Boundaries are so important. And we can only look to ourselves to do that. Um, I think the other thing I would say about this, which you haven't mentioned yet, is um, they were all working at GMA, right? Um,
Mhm.
I was reading that GMA or ABC, who holds GMA or hosts GMA, is connected to Disney, and that's why, from a corporate standpoint, at least, that what they were putting out there is why they decided to part with Amy and TJ. Now, the thing is, they didn't do that right away. They took time to do research, the corporation, and I'm not always on the corporate side. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I want to point out is it, as part of that research, it became well known that TJ was having, this was something that where Amy wasn't the first, right? He had been doing this, and he even did it in a situation where the power dynamic wasn't like him and Amy, where it was more equal. He did it with someone whose power was much less in the organization. So again, going back to what you said, boundaries are extremely important, because you can kind of look at these situations, at least retrospectively, and talk about how the use of better boundaries could have helped these different situations, or maybe even prevented them from happening. But yeah, definitely something that I think we should pay attention to, and something that is important for, that should, I guess, again, not trying to have judgment, but at the same time, if I find myself in a situation like Amy Robach, and I am talking about a man that I'm starting to have feelings for, but I see that history.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the thing with TJ, that wasn't necessarily the case with Amy, and I know it gets into this racial piece, but I think that they fired him first. And then because of the backlash from that, I think she was fired after him. But the thing is that he has a
Oh,
track
they fired him
record.
first?
I think so. And he had a track record of being untrustworthy. And I think this could be a great illustration for all of us, because if you get to know somebody and you ask them about their past relationships and they start saying, yeah, I wasn't really faithful to anybody I ever dated, we talked about red flags. That might be a red flag for Amy, to say, okay, this man, is he a womanizer or is he not a womanizer, and is he somebody that can be trusted? And further
Right.
than that, how do you know? How do you know when someone is trustworthy? How do you know?
Exactly. How do you know? I mean, I think what you kind of touched upon that already. I think an important question to ask if you're out there in meeting new people and gauging prospects for a relationship, go into it making sure you ask that question of, what were your other relationships like?
Mm-hmm.
How did they end? How did they end? Um, what were the things you took away? What did you learn from
Mm-hmm.
them? Right. Um, so that's one way I think that we can kind of gauge. Again, history for us, history is a historic behavior is a big predictor of future behavior. Find out their history. You know, are they someone that has been very gentle in breakups, or are you hearing someone that
Mm-hmm.
has cheated continuously on several relationships in their past, from back in the day to present? That's a flag.
Yeah, and even asking like, why did you cheat? I mean, that would be really nice to know,
Oh,
because there's some people I've heard people say, you know what? I thought it was okay. As long as I didn't get caught, I thought it was okay. And people who say that, I think that's a red flag that they may not be trustworthy. You got to kind of know. I mean, you can ask them direct questions too about how they are with their past relationships. I think that's great as well. But I think you
yeah,
should get into their mind and try to figure out how they think. Because if they're the kind of
right.
person who's just like, I think that relationships should not have you ever had somebody say relationships should not have rules, that all of us should be free to do whatever we want? That's a sign that maybe that person is not very trustworthy. Let's not hold each other down with rules. Let's just be able to just live and love and take one day at a time. If you got people who feel like that, that may be like their attitude may be so that they think that they have the right to do whatever they want, and their commitment doesn't necessarily have to do with fidelity. And sometimes people think that what people don't know won't hurt them. When you have people with that kind of attitude. I've also heard sometimes in my office, I'll have men who will say, well, I'm a man and men aren't meant to be monogamous. Monogamy for men is unnatural. If you start hearing some man say that, y'all, if you date somebody and they say, I don't think it's I don't think men, we're just not meant to be monogamous. You hear somebody say that, just come on. Men aren't, that's that kind of attitude. And I also think that if you are dating someone and you find out that that person is impulsive, like there's no impulse control, like whatever's on their mind, they just feel like they just go and do it and they don't think and stop and plan things. I think that's somebody who I think is untrustworthy. I'm trying to think who else could be untrustworthy. Oh, when someone says stuff like, well, I'm not promising to be perfect. No one ever says that I should be perfect. There's sometimes I make a mistake. They start already being defensive. I think that's it. And there are also some men in particular who feels like, well, if my partner finds out that I was cheating and they don't say anything about it, they just brush it under the rug, then it's okay for me to do it. Like if they have that kind of attitude, they're like, well, it's okay to cheat as long as you're all good and your partner knows and they don't say nothing about it, then it's okay to do it. It's things like that. Their attitude about relationships. Try to get into their head and think about, like, try to figure out where they're coming from. I find that you can tell if they're trustworthy. I think let me think of another one. Oh, another one is that they just, of course, we talked about a history of deception. And I'm not even talking about like cheating. If they have a history of just deceiving you in general, just lying about stuff, chances are they'll lie about an affair too, or even think it's okay.
Do they lie? Have they lied to their family? Do they lie to their
they're
family?
just liars in and of themselves. Like, have you noticed, like, you just lied so that you can get out of something? That might be a signal that they're really not trustworthy people anyway. And without trust in a relationship, that's just not, it's never going to work. And the last thing I think I would say, now that I'm thinking about it, I have this situation a lot in my office because I do see couples, and I do see couples in the aftermath of affairs. But that's not necessarily the basis of breaking up. Sometimes I'll have couples in my office, they'll come to me about an affair, a deception and all of that. And when we process a lot of this stuff, they actually don't necessarily stay together. Their relationship ends up being stronger in some sense. That's, they're able to kind of, if they're willing to deal with it. Like if they're not willing to deal with it and they're not willing to hit home with a lot of things, and they're not willing to process everything, then what's going to happen again. What were you going to say?
No, I mean, I think you hit on a strong point. And maybe it would be beneficial here to also talk about, we're not talking about one-offs, right? I think we're all people, right? We all make mistakes, big and small. Okay. So I think thus far, we've been talking a lot about these serial type of cheaters, or in general, just serial type of people who don't tell the truth when you're in a relationship, right? Things can also happen. And I think that, that's a lot of what you see in the practice, right? There are people who, wow, I made a mistake. Again, in a relationship, me, you, and the relationship. Things can go awry. Miscommunications are so huge and common. They happen every day, and that can grow, especially in a couple who's not communicating as much. And so, yeah, a lot of what we're talking about, I think, thus far has been about those couples who, or the person who goes into a relationship to become a couple with someone who's probably not trustworthy, someone who's not loyal. So, in a way that makes it also something to look out for in general, as people are dating and considering relationships with other people.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. You're right. I think we should distinguish between this one-off, like this just happened. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. Like,
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I do work with infidelity, couples who deal with infidelity, it really there is a separation. There's some person, and it could be the wife too. It ain't always the husband. Sometimes it's the wife that cheats. It's how they respond to that. If they are just like, I am so sorry, I feel so awful, this is just terrible, I'm willing to where I'm open, and I usually ask, are you willing to recommit yourself to this relationship and change your way? Yes, I am so willing. Like, you'll get that type of person. They'll be like, I'm so sorry, I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild my marriage, to make sure this relationship stays together. You get those really sincere people, and then that makes me advocate for them and say, it doesn't it seems like this person is trustworthy, and here are some signals. But if you have someone who's not open and not willing to communicate openly about what went on, how they felt, they're not able to process what happened, those are the people that I tend to be worried about, that they will do it again. Those are the serial people.
Yes.
So you're right. You really, really do need to make a distinction between just individuals who are just, they have issues, mental health issues, and probably inability to empathize, but then I get unfaithful partners who are absolutely 100% empathetic. They're empathetic to what they did. And so that's the demarcation between whether someone's trustworthy or not.
Yes. And this happens too, where just referencing, but in the situation with TJ Holmes, his wife gave him a second chance with the first one. And so I think that's a good point, because taking it away from TJ Holmes and his wife, there are situations out there, life throws us a lot of curves. And I think even the best of us, and the ones that are working hard on the relationship, can find themselves where you're a little more distant, right? And that's where things can sometimes get awry if you start turning away, from your partner, from your marriage, to do problem solving, to be vulnerable, to let yourself out there, right? That's very different than starting to date and weeding out those possible relationship partners who have a history or attitude that's more inclined to cheat or have a relationship outside of the marriage.
Yeah, I think that's also important to look at. But before we go into our last point here today, I just want to say again, hello to everyone who's here with us. We are talking about infidelity. I'm Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. I have here with me Dr. Cris. We're talking about relationships and infidelity. And recently, Amy Robach with the TJ Holmes, Amy Robach scandalous affair that was very public and they were both co-hosts on Good Morning America. They lost their job. They have to rebuild their career and also get rid of their current spouses and then start this relationship with each other. And we're talking about infidelity. And the last question I want to go over is is it even possible to prevent infidelity? Like, is that even possible to be in a relationship with someone and say, our relationship is cheat proof? I'm a cheat proof our relationship. Cris, what do you think? Is that even possible?
I'm a little bit hesitant about making something cheat proof. I don't know about that, but I do think that, first of all, it is possible for relationships to rebound from a cheating situation. Um, Actually, I think it's possible to even get stronger if you walk. I say, if you walk through the fire of what just happened and come out on the other end, you can actually be a stronger couple, have a stronger relationship, meaning. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. We're human, Alicia. We are not perfect. I don't know that you can say that there's something out there and we can put some ingredients together to make my relationship infidelity proof or fidelity proof.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's any way you can kind of like say, I just know 100% my husband or my spouse or my wife would never ever cheat. But I do think there are things you can do to minimize. And the biggest thing is to stay connected with each other. Like, I can
Absolutely.
be like I've seen couples be so connected with each other. They'll call each other at the same time. And I've heard of stories where a man will cheat, okay, and then his wife will just wake up in the middle of the night and just be like, no, something's wrong, something's going on, what it is. And that's when you have that real strong connection with each other. I noticed that you really don't get away with anything. You think you're getting away with it, but you really don't. And I think that women and men who are tuned into themselves have a sixth sense about them. Like, they can tell when something's off, like something's not right. And I think that you do have to follow that intuition. And not to say that men and women can't be blindsided by their spouse cheating on them, be like, I never saw it coming. But very rarely do you find a relationship where one person cheated and the other person was like, I was totally clueless about it. They were like, I knew something wasn't right.
Right.
Couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong with that person. Knew they was
Exactly.
out all night. Like, you can't not tell on yourself. And I think, and when you lose that connection and you're just like roommates, and that passion is gone and you haven't worked to build up that passion again, because that typically happens perfectly normal in a relationship. You do have to kind of work at it. Again, that's another realistic expectation in a relationship. You've got to work at it. You want your relationship to be well. It does take effort. I don't mean work like you're out
Water that plant.
work. I'm talking about work, meaning you have to pay attention to each other, carve out time for each other, make each other a priority. And I think that will help to minimize whether someone's going to be cheating on you or someone won't. So
Yes.
you want to add anything to that before we close out for tonight?
I don't know if you heard me, but I said you got to water that plant. if you find you're in a relationship and the plant's not being watered, okay, what does that mean? This your significant other is no longer turning to you like, babe, I had a hard day at work, this is my conflict. Or, if you're finding that, again, the person is turning away, or said differently, they're not watering that relationship plant, that's flag. That's a flag. And it's not to say that immediately that if that's happening, they're cheating, but I think, it's something to pay attention to. Right.
Yeah. I do think you need to pay attention to your relationship. Or, I mean, not that your relationship has to encompass who you are 24/7 and you're up all night thinking about it. But I do think you need to have regular moments. And I talk about this, moments throughout the day, moments during the week or date nights. You have to do what you can to keep that connection strong. And that's how you minimize. So, oh, Cris, it's been so nice talking to you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having
I
me.
am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. I'm here with my good friend Cris. She's a clinical psychologist, you guys, and she's an industrial organizational psychologist, double PhD. She's so amazing. I only got one PhD, and that's all I could do. Today, we've talked about infidelity, and we're diving into the world of celebrity relationships. We're using TJ Holmes and Amy Robach. Those are two journalists on Good Morning America. They got caught cheating. It was discovered and posted in the tabloids, and they've since then lost their job. They're trying to live their life together, and we're wondering today: is the grass always greener? When you leave one relationship for another, you're still the same you got to be able to have good conflict resolution skills. You still need to be realistic about relationships. We also talked about how do you know when someone is trustworthy? Are they open? Do they have open communication? What's their attitude about lying and about infidelity? Do they have a history of cheating? And even if they did, what do they walk away from it thinking, ooh, I got away with that, or ooh,
Right.
how did they process that? And then we talked about ways to prevent infidelity. I don't know if you can actually prevent it. Anything is possible, but there are things you can do to minimize it. That's staying connected to each other, making time for each other, putting the relationship, making the relationship important. I think those are great ways, because you don't want to be like TJ Holmes and Amy trying to date somebody at work and making it all scandalous, right? So you don't want to make yourself vulnerable. I want to thank everybody in the chat. Lori, thank you. Freddie. Hey, Freddie. Freddie said, we see nothing. We feel nothing for TJ. Yeah, TJ was, he's something. He left a really beautiful wife for Becky with the good hair. We got to bring that. We didn't talk about race, but that's part of it too. Lori, thank you for chiming in. Fly Nubian Queen, of course. Goddess Sekhmet, I love Sekhmet. Fatima, thank you for your comment. Tina Smith, thank you for joining us. And everybody else that joined us. We had a good number of people in here today, Cris. So anyway, well, we will see you again. Cris, I cannot wait to invite you back on to have these conversations about relationships and so forth. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. You can go on there. My website is coachingwithdralicia.com. If you need relationship help, you want to cheat proof your relationship and try to have a good connection with each other, you can also contact me. Contact me. I will help you do that. Okay. Bye, everybody.